Hi, welcome to this vocal percussion / beatbox tutorial specifically catered towards a cappella music. My name is Mitchell Lazaro. I'm a former music director and two-time ICCA finalist with the Ohio State of Mind in 2022 and No Comment in 2024. I've been doing vocal percussion for over a decade and I've helped a lot of people learn some basic VP skills in my time. But I feel like there still aren't very many resources to help people who are first starting out. So I'm assembling this beatbox tutorial for beginner to intermediate vocal percussionists that should help you get an idea of the basics and how to approach beatboxing for a cappella. A quick disclaimer, every VP has their own unique style, including mine, so the things that I tell you in this video might not be how another VP would explain it, and so I encourage you to go out and practice and learn what your style is and do what works best for you. So to get started, I've split this video into 3 sections: beginner, intermediate, and advanced. Because of the nature of learning something like this, you're not going to be able to learn all the techniques in one sitting. You can watch the whole thing for context, but I do encourage you to learn one section at a time, master those skills, and then move on to a more advanced section. The most important thing you can do to improve your beatbox skills is practice. Not only will you become more consistent in your flows, but you'll also build up the muscles in your face and core that help you make bigger, more powerful, and more advanced sounds. One of the best ways to practice in my experience is to beatbox along to the music that you listen to on a daily basis. Your brain already knows how these songs go, and so you can focus more on how the percussion works and how to make an individual beat for each song. Another thing you can do is beatbox along to your favorite a cappella tracks and see how those vocal percussionists approach those arrangements. Just know that when doing this, a lot of produced a cappella music uses multiple takes and layers and samples to make the VP sound more explosive and more percussive. This guide is specifically for modern contemporary a cappella, which is going to focus on genres like pop, funk, and R&B, but these principles and techniques are applicable to any style of a cappella music and beatboxing. Also, I want to clear up the difference between vocal percussion and beatboxing in my experience. Beatboxing is a performing art where one or multiple people are in charge of producing all of the sound in a performance, whereas vocal percussion is more focused on emulating the drums that you typically hear in a contemporary pop or funk or rock track. The main difference is that vocal percussion is supposed to be a part of a whole act, whereas beatbox itself tends to be the whole act. The line can be a bit blurry, and crossing it, especially in the context of a cappella, isn't always a bad thing, but in this video I'm specifically focusing on vocal percussion techniques, but I will touch on a couple of beatbox concepts that may be applicable later in the video. So without further ado, let's get started at the beginner's level. At its core, vocal percussion has 3 fundamental sounds that beats are built off of, similar to a drum kit. Those are kicks, hi-hats, and snares. Being able to make these sounds in a consistent, repeatable pattern is the foundation for everything we're going to do from here on out. Let's start with our kick. This is going to be using the B consonant. Start by saying the word B and then slowly cut off the E sound at the end. B, B, B. So that B right there is the fundamental sound of the kick drum. By pursing your lips, you're going to be able to build up more pressure and make a more full sound, which is ultimately what we're aiming for. So you have your basic sound. Now tighten your lips and add a little bit more tension, and you'll be able to build up that pressure. So let's do this process all together, starting from the word B and ending up at our kick sound. So starting with the word B, B, B. And then pursing our lips. And you can see how my jaw is lowering and it's getting more resonant. So now use this time, pause the video, practice some kicks, and resume when you're ready. For our hi-hat, this is represented by the T consonant, but I find it better to explain in the context of a TS sound, similar to in the word pizza. So let's start off the same way we started out for our kick and say the word pizza, ultimately chopping off the beginning and the end. So pizza turns to tsa, tsa, and then cut off the vowel at the end, tsa, 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 tsa. So it's a perfectly isolated TS sound. That's basically all you need to know for the hi-hat, but one variation you can do is to extend the S sound of the ts to fill in some gaps in your beat, like this. Instead of going I can extend that S sound and go, which makes a more full beat. Our last basic sound is our snare, of which there are 2 basic varieties, the K snare and the P snare. Snares have the most potential for variation, and they're what people struggle with the most. Starting with an outward K snare, I'll talk about the inward K a little bit later, we're going to use the word tack. The sound you want from this comes from the back of your tongue being up against the roof of your mouth. So start by saying the word tack, but stop before you make the k sound. Tack, tack. And you can see how your tongue is stuck against the roof of your mouth. Then just make the k sound by itself. So tack, tack. Once you feel comfortable doing that, add some air behind that k sound to make it as percussive as possible. Tack. You'll notice that this sound can only get so loud, so try this. Take that contact point of where your tongue is against the roof of your mouth, move it forward, and add a little bit more roundness to your mouth. That looks a little something like this. Eventually, you'll get to a point where instead of that air seeping out, it will all come out in this one sharp K sound. So instead of it will be, and this will set the foundation for the inward K snare that we're going to learn later. The P or PF snare is our other type of snare, and it's kind of the hardest to explain, so bear with me a little bit on this one. You're going to want to make the sound when you don't know the answer to a question someone asks you. Pff, I don't know. And that pff is kind of the basic sound that we're going to use. So let's work on making that more percussive. So similar to how we tensed up our lips and pursed our lips in the kick sound, the same idea applies to the P snare, but you're going to want to do that in kind of a horizontal line. So instead of you're going to want to go, and again, it's that sound. It's hard to find the exact level of tension you need for this, but if you practice it, you'll get better and better. The release part of the sound is the combination of a hiss sound and an F sound. You're going to do this by holding the consonant F. And then you're going to want to put the tip of your tongue behind where your top teeth are touching your lower lip to make the F sound. So from to moving your tongue behind where that happens. So it's kind of a combination of a hiss and an F sound. Now combining this whole thing together, again, it's the sound. Tighten your lips, add that F hiss behind it. You go from to it won't be as percussive as mine there, but you get the point. A variation on this is the PSH snare, where instead of holding the sound, you're going to hold a sh sound where your tongue is very forward. So instead of it's going to be PSH. And this is going to set the foundation for crashes, which we'll learn in a more advanced section. So real quick before we end this section, let's do a couple example beats in our common time signatures. These are going to be very basic beats, but will set the foundation and are good for you to practice before moving on to the next section. A framework for a basic 4/4 time signature beat is going to be BTKT or BTPT, depending on what snare you use. So that's going to sound like, or if you use the P snare, practice that. The other common time signature that you see pop up in arrangements is 6/8. And this is going to be BTTKTT or BTTPTT. And that's going to sound a little something like this. So try that one out. Now you'll notice that the more that you do this back to back to back, you might be struggling with breath. The best way to implement breaths is either right after the final hi-hat in a phrase or to replace a hi-hat with a similar sounding breath. So using our 4/4 example, that would be and that's putting it after the hi-hat, or you can replace the hi-hat. It can sound a little out of place, but when you get more advanced, that's a good technique. This breath problem can also be solved by doing inward sounds such as the inward K, which I'll demonstrate here in a little bit. The last thing I want to emphasize before going on to the intermediate section is that the more you practice these fundamental sounds and implementing them into beats, the faster you will progress and the better you will be in the later stages. It might sound counterintuitive, but this is what works. Taking the time now will make you learn faster in the future and be able to get to more complex beats. So now that we're in the intermediate section, let's expand our sound library a little bit. These sounds will help smooth the gaps in some of your beats and help your breath work as your beats get more complex. Our first sound is the inward K snare, and I'll explain some of the basics of it, but there are a lot of tutorials out on YouTube and other places that probably do a much better job explaining it than I do. You're going to start in the same position as your outward K snare, but instead of the pressure coming from the back of your tongue and that sound being outward, you're going to want to try to breathe in to build that pressure, like so. Instead of, you're going to want to breathe in. What makes the sound super percussive is that your tongue gets literally ripped off the roof of your mouth, which makes a very sharp K sound. Some people find this easier to do kind of on the left side or right side of their mouth or in the middle, but there won't be much of a difference which side you choose. It's whatever feels more comfortable for you. A couple more examples. On the left side for my mouth, in the middle, or on the right side. I tend to prefer left or middle. Again, I don't think I'm the best at explaining the sound, so I encourage you, if that didn't help you, to go look up tutorials on YouTube for a better explanation. I'll also note that I do my K snare, my inward K snare, a little bit different. I make it like this. What I do is I make almost a clicking sound, so a tongue click, but I leave the front of my tongue on the roof of my mouth, and so my sound is a little bit more forward than other people's sound, which in my experience has given me a bit more of a percussive, snappy type feel. So my instance is, and so by breathing in and making that sound, I get a nice cracky type sound out of my snare. So if you notice that I do it different throughout the rest of this video, that's why. The second minor addition we can add to our sound library is to expand our hi-hats into 2 sounds instead of 1. And we're going to do this by pretending we're saying the word ticka. So similar to how your hi-hat was if you add just a non-voweled K sound right after that, similar to ticka, but with the vowels removed, it sounds like tick, 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 tick. Let's try a practice beat that includes both of these sounds. It's going to go kick, ticka, ticka, kick, snare, ticka, ticka, kick, kick. So I'll put that on the screen, and it sounds like this. A little faster. Try that over and over. If you're still struggling with the inward K snare, you can use another snare to fill in that gap to practice the ticka sound. So that would be. Our next sound is one that you've kind of been introduced to already, but this is going to talk about more how to use it in context. Crashes are sounds that really contribute to how full a vocal percussionist routine sound and just can make your overall sound feel more professional and more built up. All you need to do for this is take the PSH sound from the beginner section and extend the SH like a cymbal. So instead of you're going to hold that SH. That can be used to kind of shape the sound and add a little bit more kind of a fade out that you'd like to see in a normal cymbal. Now, because we're already a little bit familiar with the technique, let's talk about where it belongs in your beats. The 2 main ways to incorporate crashes are either at the beginning of a section to signal that we've arrived in a new section, or to emphasize something happening in the background vocals. For example, if you're building into a section, you could have something that's like so right at the beginning of the beat. Or let's say you have a background part that sounds something like ba da 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 ba da da da. You could do something like so that kind of accentuates what's happening in the background. Something I want to point out, because I learned this lesson way too late, it's okay to replace the kick at the beginning of a measure with a crash, because that crash is going to make your sound much more full. So if you build into a section like, and there are times that works, but that's not as full as, something like that. So it's going to be a lot more full to add that crash in there, and don't be afraid to replace that kick. The last technique we're going to learn in the intermediate section is called a riser, and that's something that we've already kind of touched on with the crash. These are kind of whooshing sounds that help build in or out of a section. So like whoosh or again, the tail end of a crash is a form of a riser, and it's also a really good way to help you control the breath in your lungs. I really strongly recommend knowing how to do risers, both breathing in and out, as well as being able to switch between the two very steadily and consistently. So, for example, if I don't have enough air in my lungs and I want to do a bunch of risers, I could go and it kind of all builds to that end without me having to only do one way and running out of breath. I won't be doing a full tutorial of this technique, but if you imagine kind of the cartoonish gulp sound when a cartoon is nervous, that's a similar place in your throat that a throat kick lives. Just imagine that, but quicker, and if that's not a good enough explanation, go on YouTube, look up throat kick tutorials. There are plenty of good ones out there. So an example of how I would build into a section using risers and throat kicks would be like something like that. And those are all the techniques we're going to learn in the intermediate section. Something to keep in mind before you move on to the next section is that this is where you're going to really want to start trying to build some power behind your sounds. The human ear tends to like things that are loud more than things that are soft. So in my opinion, it's much better to be able to make your sounds as loud as you want and then pull back when necessary in a specific arrangement. In vocal percussion, air is the key to making loud sounds. The more air you have behind a sound, the more tension that you can build up and the louder your sounds will be. A quick and easy way to just add more power to your sound is make sure everything is supported by a strong core and a strong diaphragm, which is similar to a lot of singing techniques. So, for example, if I want to make a loud kick sound, if I don't have any of my core engaged, it's going to sound like. So all that tension is coming from my mouth. And if you're not as experienced as I am, if you haven't been doing this for a decade, that's not going to sound as loud and full. However, if you engage your core and diaphragm, it's going to sound like. I can get a lot more percussiveness out of any sound that I try to do if I use my core and my diaphragm to give more tension. Lastly, because this is a tutorial specific for a cappella, it's time to start looking at the arrangements that you're going to be doing vocal percussion for and figuring out how to build a routine. In my experience, you can split your routine into two categories. You have your flows and your moments. Flows are your basic drum patterns that can vary from section to section, whereas moments tend to only last a few seconds and involve you highlighting something in the background of an arrangement or doing a little drum solo or a feature. I won't go into any details further than that, but having that context of splitting things into what are your flows and what are your moments is really going to help you elevate your routine. Now that we've moved on to the advanced section, there are a couple more techniques you can do to fill in any further gaps that you have in your routines. The first concept is called combos, and it's when you do a couple sounds in very short succession. The two that I use the most are the BDB and TKT combos. The BDB sounds like, and the TKT is. They're very similar, but just using two different sounds. The reason these work so well is because you can do them in very short triplet patterns, which kind of adds to more of the texture of your routine. I already covered doing the TK, the ticka sound in the intermediate section, and so TKT is just adding another hi-hat to the end of that. So instead of tick, tick, you just add another hi-hat at the end. Tick, 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 tick. Practice that. The BDB combo follows a very similar idea. Say the phrase boo-da-boo, boo-da-boo, and then take away the vowels from that. Instead of boo-da-boo, boo-da-boo. An important variation I suggest you know on the BDB combo is the DBD combo, and that's really helpful if the sound right after that combo is another kick. So it's hard to go. I can do it because I've been doing it for a while, but that might be harder for you. So instead, start your combo with the D sound. Here are a couple beats to try with these combos. Starting in 4/4 using the TKT combo, it's going to go. A little faster would be. For our BDB combo, we're going to do a rhythm that's in 6/8, and that's going to go. A little faster sounds like this. And that BDB combo is nice because it translates into the final concept, toms. If you don't know what tom drums are, they're pitched, and so in a lot of rock genres, they help build into a big section or a big crash. To do these, you're going to want to make the sound that an owl makes. Hoo, hoo, hoo. And then you're going to want to do a BD, BD, BD combo over top of that. So that sounds like. One more time fast. Those are all the sounds that we're going to formally talk about, but I'll mention a couple techniques that are more applicable to beatboxing, but might still be helpful for a vocal percussionist to know. If you would like formal tutorials on any of these sounds, plenty of YouTube creators have made tutorials that are much better than anything I could explain, so I encourage you to go check them out if you feel ready for these sounds. The first sound is throat bass. The second sound is the lip roll, and specifically the inward lip roll. A normal lip roll is, an inward lip roll is, so you can kind of extend that. It's a good substitute for a sub bass. And then the last sound is less of a sound and more of a concept called the inward drag. The inward drag involves breathing in and out in very short succession and sometimes adding sounds over that, and it really helps expand the world of what is possible. And I feel like most of that's applicable to beatboxing, but some techniques would still be helpful for vocal percussionists. That sounds something like this. Or if you want to add sounds over that. The last thing I want to talk about is staying in the pocket. A lot of this is my opinion, but in my experience, a lot of really good vocal percussionists kind of agree with me on this. A lot of vocal percussionists, as they learn bigger and cooler sounds, will want to show off those sounds in their beats. But remember, when you're doing a vocal percussion routine, your job is to be one part of a bigger sound. So if you're drawing attention away from the soloist or the rest of the group and you're not fitting into what they're doing, you're harming the group rather than helping. The beatboxers will hear your cool sounds and think they're cool, but it doesn't sound as good as a full mixed together sound. Your goal as a vocal percussionist should be to contribute to the rhythmic foundation of a group and fill in the sounds that only the drums can make in a normal mix. So keep that in mind. Practice, practice, practice. I cannot emphasize how important practicing is. And soon you're going to improve a lot in the skills you can do, in your abilities, and you'll be a bigger and better vocal percussionist than you were before. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope this really helped. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below. I'll try to respond to any of those. You can also shoot me an email or an Instagram DM at my links, which can be found on the screen and in the description. In addition to vocal percussion, I'm an award-winning arranger, and I have several years of experience leading groups to the highest levels in competition. And I offer arrangements, consulting, and masterclasses if you really want to help your group elevate to their next level. Also, if you're looking to release music on streaming platforms or YouTube, I do audio recording and production for a company called Cutoff Studios, so shoot me an email and we can talk about that if you're interested as well. If any of this is of interest to you or your group, I'd love to chat and see how I can help contribute to your guys' success. Again, just shoot me an Instagram DM or an email, and good luck on your vocal percussion journey. You got this.